the nonprofit success coach here at the Taproot Foundation. I work primarily with our Taproot Plus team to help bring our kind of online programs, our online marketplace to nonprofit users and skilled volunteers such as yourself. So as we're kind of beginning the presentation here, if you all want to drop your, as we like to say, professional superpower into the chat, and talk about, what skills you might be interested in donating to nonprofit organizations, you can do so. But thank you all. I'll give you an official welcome for being here on our Donate Your Professional Experience to Great Causes in 2023. Still weird to say 2023. We're excited to have you join us all today as we look to kick off 2023 on a positive note. So creating connections that lead to social change is what we are all about. So I'm excited to share information about our nonprofit. Taproot Foundation is a nonprofit ourselves, and how our pro bono programs offer business professionals like yourselves opportunities to make a difference using your professional strengths on behalf of mission-driven organizations. So despite all the challenging circumstances that these organizations are facing today, people like you are ready to step in and help their communities and the mission-driven organizations in their communities. So without further ado, we can go ahead and jump into our main content. And I'm actually just going to talk a little bit about Taproot Foundation and what we're actually going to be covering throughout the event today to get you kind of up to date on what our agenda is going to be. So we also are going to have a few minutes at the end of the presentation for a Q&A session. So if you all have any questions, keep in mind they might be answered throughout the duration of the presentation. But if they're not, you can drop them into the chat or the Q&A. And my colleague Megan is going to boost those out to me at the end of the presentation during our Q&A. So a little bit more about Taproot Foundation. The Taproot Foundation is a nonprofit that drives social change by leading, mobilizing, and engaging professionals in pro bono service. Since the early 2000s, Taproot has partnered with over about 9,000 social change organizations and about 30,000 volunteers. I'm rounding up because these stats are a little old. So that number has increased since we last updated these periodically. Altogether totaling over 260 million in donated professional services to nonprofits. In addition to Taproot's pro bono programs and our own consultancy work, we're leaders of a global pro bono network and are committed to advancing the pro bono movement through further research, education, and events. So during today's event, we'll be covering why your skills matter to the social sector and to mission-driven organizations, especially now. We're also going to be joined by a special guest, a nonprofit who has used Taproot Plus, that's going to share their experience working with skilled volunteers, people like you. And they're also going to talk about what to expect while working with nonprofits and best practices for managing a successful pro bono project. Following that conversation, I'm going to share kind of a step-by-step guide about how you can kind of get into using our online marketplace, Taproot Plus, to donate your professional skills to nonprofits on a pro bono basis, and give you some tips for managing a virtual pro bono engagement. Then we will dive into our Q&A after that if you have any outstanding questions. We're also going to post contact information and be available afterwards as well. So this won't be the last time you hear from us. We'll send a follow-up email to you all with a recording of this webinar. We'll also try to answer any questions that we were not able to take on the live on the webinar. We'll follow up with you since we do keep a recording of the chat. So be on the lookout for that follow-up email. It will also have some information if you'd like to get in touch with our nonprofit guest today as well. So I'll start you off with like a few stats about why pro bono is so necessary and why it's important for skilled volunteers to be doing this kind of work for nonprofits. So Over the last 2 years, nonprofits have had to operate more leanly than ever, meeting rising community needs while dealing with decreased areas access to hands-on volunteer support, a lot of canceled fundraising events, and even more. So, in Taproot's 2020 nonprofit profit resiliency survey, we found that about 63% of respondents reported a decrease in funding due to the COVID-19 pandemic, meaning that these already small and scrappy organizations are making do with even smaller budgets and less bandwidth as they try and dig out of the kind of pandemic economy along with everyone else. So it goes without saying what a vital role social good organizations play in keeping our communities safe, strong, and kind. And social good organizations are being looked at more and more for vital services, but at the same time, their traditional funding and volunteer sources are shifting and or shrinking dramatically. Even more of a reason that your pro bono support with your skill set as a skilled volunteer is all the more vital. So, really, to put it simply, most organizations tackling social problems don't have access to the resources, funding, or staff expertise needed to fully accomplish their vital missions. The lack of ability to invest in their internal operations saps their ability to build strong, resilient, and sustainable organizations. And due to the current global crises that are ongoing, nonprofit organizations are feeling this strain right now, kind of more than ever, as you might expect. So this is where skilled volunteers come in. This is where you come in. So Taproot Foundation helps bridge the nonprofit resource gap through connections with skilled volunteers like you who provide your expertise in tech, marketing, HR, strategy, finance, and much, much more. And you provide that experience on a pro bono basis for nonprofits. So that's what Taproot is all about, is fostering those types of engagements. I want to just pause here for a moment. We'll do a little etymology. Often, when people hear the term pro bono, they think of legal services. It's almost ubiquitous to think of pro bono in a legal context. But actually, you can have pro bono anything. So you can just have pro bono marketing. You can have pro bono, design work. You can have pro bono web development. Pro bono is just donated professional services benefiting organizations working to improve society. So that is our definition. In the business community, like I said, this typically refers to things like marketing, strategic planning, financial management, HR, and IT needs. But pro bono can run the gamut from professional services, from plumbing to architecture as well. So it's not just the legal field, even though that's the place where you hear the term pro bono the most. Taproot actually feels that our partners in the legal field already do pro bono service really well. So if you are looking to engage in pro bono legal service, we can point you in the right direction, but we leave that to them since they already do it so well. In fact, in many ways, we're working to kind of create the same infrastructure they have in that field for pro bono service. So, to help make it easier to understand how everything fits together, the Taproot Foundation created this helpful diagram showing the full spectrum of common corporate community engagement activities. We've grouped them by the common types of nonprofit needs that need to be addressed, and in the different ways companies and the kind of private sector can help support them. So, at the very top is a simplified categorization of nonprofit needs, from making budget, extra hands, and infrastructure and leadership. Making budget just means having the funding that they need to run the organization's programs. Extra hands means to deliver services and programs directly to the community. So these are the people staffing the soup kitchens, doing the actual kind of work on the ground, if it's that kind of nonprofit. We're licking the envelopes, stamping them, distributing things. That types of hands-on volunteer support that is so critical to a lot of nonprofits. And infrastructure and leadership is the last segment. So having those critical components in place that are the backbone of any healthy institution. Then beneath that are the common buckets of support that companies tend to provide to address those needs. So obviously, providing financial support is one of the most obvious ways you can benefit nonprofits. But you can also benefit nonprofits with hands-on volunteering or kind of general skills. So you can see the examples listed out underneath each of those. When we say volunteerism, this is actually typically what most people think of when they think about working on behalf of a nonprofit. They're thinking about, painting the wall or stuffing the envelopes or something like that, where you'd kind of get down and start doing the nitty gritty hands-on volunteering. And many nonprofits use that type of volunteer support, and that type of volunteer support is critical for the operations of those nonprofits. But we want everyone to know that that's not the only type of volunteer support that nonprofits can benefit from. So you can see skills-based volunteering is also a form of engagement that is oftentimes not discussed. So basically, you can use the skills that you already use on a daily basis doing your job to benefit nonprofits. So you can see things like pro bono expertise, like we facilitate here at the Taproot Foundation, but also things like board service and general skills fall under the bucket of skills-based volunteerism as well. So, hands on volunteering, financial donations, and pro bono service all play key roles in strengthening a nonprofit and helping it achieve its mission. One form of an engagement should not fully replace the other. However, pro bono service offers a great option for professionals like yourself who might not have thousands of dollars to donate to nonprofits that they love and care about and make a difference in their community. But you can make a huge difference just by donating the skills that you already use on a day-to-day basis for your own job. So I do want to briefly just talk about the actual value of pro bono service. So in 2019, Taproot and CECP, Chief Executives for Corporate Purpose, updated the findings around the actual financial impact of an hour of pro bono volunteering in the areas of PR, information technology, HR, financial services, design, advertising, marketing, and accounting. Through this study, we determined that the average hour of business pro bono across all sectors, just an average, is about $195 per hour. So we all don't have thousands of dollars lying around to donate to our favorite mission-driven organizations, but the benefit of pro bono service is really in its multiplier effect. So pro bono projects done with nonprofits using your skill set oftentimes are valued in the thousands of dollars. So donating your skills is a way that you can actually donate thousands of dollars to nonprofit organizations. I would love to be able to throw a ton of money at all the organizations I care about, but we don't always have that, right? So this is another way in which you can give back that can really have a multiplier effect. So we've talked a lot about what nonprofits receive from pro bono service. But you also get value out of the experience of doing pro bono service as well. So you can make a substantial impact, obviously, on causes that are near and dear to your heart while learning about challenges impacting communities across the globe. You can build your own professional network. It's really helpful in flexing existing talents in new environments and developed key soft skills such as empathy, leadership, and collaboration. You can also help strengthen your resume and portfolio with tactical examples of experience and your connection to the community. So it's really a great way to demonstrate to any future employees that you're engaged with your community. It's also a really great way to avoid any of those kind of dreaded gaps on a resume. You can take on pro bono projects in between opportunities or in between jobs to keep your skills fresh. And obviously, future employers love to see that as well. And at the end of the day, the biggest benefit of pro bono is the support you're able to offer the nonprofits. So you'll be assisting their mission, and that in turn supports community members. So when you give back on a marketplace like Taproot Plus, you have the opportunity to support organizations working in all of these cause groups. Taproot supports nonprofits in pretty much all issue areas, which means you can align your professional talents with the cause area that you're uniquely passionate about. And I just want to give you this wonderful quote from Ann Holcomb of the nonprofit Unity Parenting and Counseling, who's benefited from Taproot services. Your efforts as volunteers really pay off for nonprofits at the end of the day. And a nonprofit's bottom line is their mission, and you can help them get there when your skills are paired with the right nonprofit need. So now I want to just pause and actually talk to an actual member of our nonprofit community who is going to just pop in and talk about their experience using pro bono support. And we're going to get her perspective on working with volunteers, and what kind of impact that has made on her organization. And we'll also give you some kind of tips and best practices about what to expect in working with a nonprofit. So I want everyone to give a warm welcome to Bojgan Besharat, who is joining us from Durham, North Carolina. And we have some kind of basic facts up here about Bojgan and her nonprofit, In Her Vision Foundation Incorporated, and some recently completed projects that she was able to complete with skilled volunteers just like you on Taproot Plus. So I want to welcome Bojgan. Hi. And I think we'll just kind of start off by can you just tell us what is your nonprofit's mission and vision? What are you all doing in the community?
Awesome. Well, hi, Josh, and welcome everybody. What a great organization to be a part of, and I really appreciate being here with you all. Um, in her vision is really born from this place of experience for me as an eye doctor, in terms of communities in need that truly need accessible eye care, and however, there's so many folks that can't afford it and don't have health insurance or any means of getting that care. And so our organization, our foundation really truly goes to communities to do this work. And we partner with other nonprofits who are on the ground already helping others in the community. And that is how we are connected to other organizations
Yeah.
doing this work. Yeah. And our really, the whole mission is to really be able to take care of folks who truly don't have access to care and need it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so many nonprofits are kind of called upon to fill in gaps in various sectors in the economy, and that's obviously a big reason why the social sector is so important. So obviously, pro bono work from skilled volunteers is done for free, which is great. But are there any other reasons that you engage in pro bono work with skilled volunteers, or maybe other benefits that you kind of discovered along the way of getting that kind of assistance?
Yeah, I really appreciate this question. I feel like it hits the heart of it all, right? We're in this work to really be of service to others and to work with pro bono volunteers who are skilled at what they do, who are opening their heart to doing this work is just a continuation. It's like an echo that we are all in terms of really truly opening our arms wide and doing this work together. So it feels really connected to work with others who are really aligned with you, and are there to really help from their heart and are skilled at what they're doing.
Right. Yeah, we oftentimes collect data and have taken internal surveys from our skilled volunteers in our system about, so why do you donate services? Why do you volunteer? And one of the biggest reasons is, you know, I want to do something I care about. I want to use my skill set, to do something that's mission driven, that I know I can actually make an impact on. So, being able to like have that experience of helping, a nonprofit can be really, really edifying. A lot of people have found, and it's one of the main draws. It's probably a reason why there's probably a lot of people on this call right now who are interested in donating their service. Um, so we have some of these projects listed out that you've recently completed with skilled volunteers. Um, do you have an example of one of these maybe that was like particularly impactful, and kind of what was the deliverable? What did you all work towards? Kind of
Mhm.
how did it make a difference with the organization?
Yeah, thank you. Really, two really integral pieces because we're truly a very young nonprofit. we started in 2021. And so we really needed grant writing help as a very young organization trying to get off the ground. And the work that we did through a skilled volunteer through Taproot was paramount in our ability to get the grants, at least to get us floating and moving and taking action that's sustainable in really doing this outreach to our community and really going out there and doing these mobile clinics. So that was enormous. And it was like a 9-week time frame. We met weekly. It really taught me a lot about grant writing. So I really appreciated that as well, the learning that came with that,
Yeah.
and also the commitment of that individual. We were communicating through like different parts of the world as they were in South Africa.
Hmm.
So it was huge and so doable. So I really appreciated that. And then the other project that was really super valuable because it really highlighted for me, I'm a very action oriented individual. And so I already started the clinics and was out there doing all this work without really ever sitting down and realizing the strata and the minutia of all that it took to really do this work. And I worked with a skilled volunteer who really created this beautiful action plan map of like all of the work that we've been doing. And this really helps us when it comes to asking for funding, but also really talking about the work that we do in all these different layered ways. So that was really insightful and super helpful in other aspects of our organization.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I love all that. And really like when you're working with skilled volunteers, what are you thinking about when you maybe post a new project and you have
Mm.
interested people kind of approaching you and asking about the project and applying to it? And for people on the call, I'll go into kind of like the logistics of how you can do that a little bit later. But I'm really interested in hearing from you. What are you looking for when you are selecting, kind of the perfect match for a project? What are the qualities you think skilled volunteers working with nonprofits should focus on? So
Mhm.
give us kind of like the insider tips about what nonprofits might be looking for when they're vetting skilled volunteers, because it can be maybe a little different.
Mhm.
Nonprofits have different priorities than maybe people are familiar with when they go into maybe like an interview in the business world or something like that.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Honestly, I think it has to start with commitment. Like really being clear about what you're willing to commit to and really showing up, just like you would any paying job, right? That level of commitment is matched to this purpose, right? That if you're really moving with purpose, you're also moving with commitment to that purpose. And then communication is really important here. Communicating with the nonprofit contact person directly and being very clear about boundaries and also ways that you're willing to really show up makes a difference. And just keeping up to date about everything is helpful. That's not really any different, I don't think, from a nonprofit to profit world. um, and then skills, my goodness. Being really clear about our skills and what your skill level is and what you're very like comfortable and adept at that you can bring to the foreground for that nonprofit. It's huge, you
Yeah.
know, very big. Like we might go in thinking we want something, and then the volunteer will show up and will start speaking about what they're really good at. And you're like, oh my goodness, I didn't even think about it like that. So that's really valuable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You mentioned something that kind of hit on. Internally, we have this thing that we like to call the golden rule of pro bono, which is, the golden rule of pro bono is, if you take nothing else away from this webinar but this, treat every project like it was a for pay engagement. And
Hmm.
that generally will secure the best outcomes. And that is true for the nonprofit and for the skilled volunteers. So committing to deadlines, committing to a communication plan, committing to honest feedback and direct feedback. A lot of times nonprofits are
Hmm.
like, well, they're volunteering, so we'll just kind of accept whatever. And we always say like, no, this is a partnership. Use the golden
Hmm.
rule of pro bono. And we found that in most cases, volunteers don't want to be buttered up, about their, their work. They want honest and direct feedback.
Mhm.
They want to know that what they're producing is actually really, really helpful for the nonprofit. And so we always like kind of push that golden rule of pro bono. You touched on something else that's really critical in kind of the vetting stage, which is you as skilled volunteers on this call, you are kind of the experts in whatever skill set that the nonprofit is looking for. So sometimes people read project descriptions on our marketplace and they go, well, I don't know if I can I'm not clear on this, or I'm not sure if I can complete every item in, the deliverable. But oftentimes it can be really helpful to just have that initial conversation with the nonprofit, because a lot of times the nonprofits don't have the kind of knowledge level to know, hey, this part of the deliverable you want is probably just going to be the main piece, and that
Mhm.
we need to kind of wait to work on other aspects of it later. You're the experts in the whatever the skill set is, and you can really help nonprofits actually better understand their own need, because that's something that a lot of nonprofits have historically struggled with, is understanding like what their need is. um, and so that's always really, really helpful. Sometimes, you know volunteers get disappointed because they're like, well, once we unpacked the need a little bit more, we realized that the nonprofit actually needed to go back to the drawing board, and so we decided not to move forward with the project. And what I tell them, is, you might have talked them out of doing this project, but you still added value because you saved them time on, going down kind of a rabbit hole trying to do this project that you both realized together. They did not necessarily like have all their ducks in a row to actually accomplish. So I think you highlighted that, when you were talking about like sharing the knowledge and the skill itself, in a really, really important way. Um,
If
so
I may
what
just say
Yeah,
something here,
go for
Josh,
it.
just to kind of tag on to that, and this is something that I was actually thinking about, is that truly what I appreciated about the volunteers that I worked with that were so skilled at what they were doing, was how they stepped up to
Mhm.
really guide, to really maneuver the project. I may have thought about it as a certain way, but the fact that they opened the door and the window to a whole different perspective and really drove it, helped me grow as somebody who's running a nonprofit. And I really appreciated that. So there is some equitability here that I really want folks to take away, is that your skills and your knowledge and your competency are no small thing to a nonprofit that is really having to deal with so many aspects of running a nonprofit or get making things happen. And so it is tremendous what you bring to the table.
Yeah, I love that because we always try to tell volunteers as well, again, your professional skills, you're the expert in, and the nonprofit, there might be unknown unknowns, right, at the nonprofit that they don't
Hmm.
even know about. And we also tell skilled volunteers that, remember, a lot of people who run nonprofits are, they maybe necessarily have never been in like a professional project management setting or something like that before. So when it comes to really kind of managing this project together, one of the biggest skills that I think volunteers bring to the table, no matter what their specific skill set is just, directing and organizing the actual engagement, because a lot of nonprofits are led by, people who didn't necessarily work in a professional setting, but now they've retired and they're just very passionate. Or and it can mean that the skilled volunteers can really step in and use project management expertise to kind of direct like the engagement. And it's kind of a bridging between two worlds of professional services and nonprofits who have these really inspiring missions and kind of need that structure that skilled volunteers can actually provide. Um, yeah, so I'm interested in hearing for you kind of what advice do you have for any skilled volunteers, the people on this webinar, looking to donate their skills to nonprofits, or if you have any kind of specific do's and don'ts that
Mm.
would be helpful to kind of prep people for these types of opportunities?
I think really taking the time to get very clear about the time that you're willing to give
Mm,
is really relevant. Some of the pitfalls that we experienced were volunteers that would like say yes and then not show up.
mhm.
Which is
Right.
just a lot of time wasted on both parties. And so,
Yeah.
like, being very clear about the time that you're willing to give, the commitment you're willing to give, your own boundaries around the work that you're willing to do, and taking action from this really connected and centered space around what really matters to you and how you want to show up. Because it does resonate and it does make a difference for the nonprofit. Yeah, and communicating. Once
Yeah.
again, back to that, communication is just getting we all have different communication styles, and really appreciating the complexity of navigating that with another person on the other side, regardless of who they are. It really is important, right? It's just
Right.
like, wow, that's how we connect with each other. So let's really work at that. Let's really try to understand a little more. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
And it's interesting when, there's cases when, pro bono projects didn't pan out or failed. And 9 times out of 10, it's that really basic kind of elemental stuff that is the reason for the ultimate derailing of the project. It's misaligned timelines or not unclear communication or unclear
Mhm.
expectations about how we're going to communicate.
Yeah.
Um, like it's
Mhm.
actually very, very kind of basic elemental stuff is usually 9 times out of 10 the kind of point of failure. It's not, oh, this task was actually too difficult, for me, or like I didn't actually have the skills to do this. It's always in kind of those kind of basic core components of, project management, which is why I emphasize with our skilled volunteers to, kind of take the lead on that with a nonprofit, because it can be so helpful. And it will pay dividends for you as a skilled volunteer. It makes all the difference on the end, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So, and now the nonprofit has also learned something at the same
Mhm.
time. Um, as pursuant to that, I think you've already talked about this a little bit, but what's something that you've learned from skilled volunteers that maybe you didn't know before?
Yeah, exactly what I said. Like, I'm an eye doctor and I am also a somatic coach and I have all these other things that are in my wheelhouse, but sometimes there's not a lot. I just have learned a lot around business development that I'm still trying to learn. Um, just in terms of the the whole aspect of the nonprofit world was so unique to me, and having someone who was familiar in that world is so
Mhm.
helpful when, you're coming from that perspective. So just yeah, I really feel like every opportunity to work with somebody is a growing experience for both of us.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And there's somebody who dropped a question in the chat
Mhm.
actually. Um, they wanted to hear a little bit more about that financial analysis
Ah.
project.
Yeah,
I
we
think.
were running into like a little bit of the end of the year. Oh my God, we have to file our this 1099 thing that we have no clue about. And so we needed some direction on really like how do you do this? Like how does this even happen? And so the individual was very just helpful in getting us to take care of that and really like be able to make that happen in a timely manner so that we were following the guidelines with the federal government to be able to still remain a nonprofit, right? Keep our designation. So that was pretty much what that was. Pretty straightforward, very clear, delivered very much on time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you talked about that grant writing project. I think starting off with that, to anyone who might be watching who has any kind of grant writing experience, especially in the nonprofit sector, it's one of the areas in which
Hmm.
it's a tremendous like area of assistance that like nonprofits need. We always are looking for skilled volunteers who are grant writers. We always have more nonprofits with needs in that area than we actually do skilled volunteers in our pool. that can do that. So I was so happy when that was actually one of the projects you were able to complete, because you were able to get one of the coveted grant researchers or writing assistant people, that are so kind of valued. So if anyone has that skill set in particular, we would
Yes.
love to have you in our system.
Yes, and
Um,
it worked out so beautifully for them because after we finished our work together, um, they asked me if they could use me as a reference for this job that they were applying for through this really big organization in doing some work around that. And it worked out so beautifully because I had such
yeah,
direct contact with them. They were able to get that job. So it's just
right.
like so it felt really good.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
beautiful.
and
Yeah.
I mean, that's wonderful going back to that information I showed of,
Hmm.
the ROI is obvious for a nonprofit in a certain way. But for skilled volunteers, if you do such a good job and have such a good partnership, it's obviously, keeping your resume current, but you now have like a new reference who will speak glowingly about you, for any,
Hmm.
future opportunities. And it's a nonprofit, it shows a lot of community engagement. So that's just another one of the benefits, along with like that personal edification, but it can also help definitely with career advancement as well.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I mean, Mojgan, thank you so much for your time, and sharing your nonprofit's experience and working with skilled volunteers. I love having guests on these webinars, not only because it allows me to take a drink, and kind of clear my vocal cords, but oftentimes the people who actually use and do pro bono can put it in way better terms than I can. So we love having guests and people that have actually used these services and given pro bono service on these webinars. Um, but I know you're busy, so we're going to let you get back to it.
Thank
For
you,
everyone
Josh.
wondering, we are going to put Mojgan's information in the follow up. So if for whatever reason you'd like to reach out or learn more about the nonprofit, you could do so there. But we are going to let Mojgan go for now. Thank you so
Thank
much,
you.
Mojgan.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody. It was
Yeah,
really nice to be with you all.
we'll see you online later.
Okay.
Have a good one. So obviously, Mojgan was able to share, her perspective on being a nonprofit that's benefited from skilled volunteerism. Now that we've kind of talked about the impact of pro bono and skilled volunteerism, I kind of want to get into some logistics of, okay, how do you end up working with, a nonprofit like Mojgan's nonprofit? Where can you go to find people, who work at nonprofits who need help? So that's kind of where we come in here at the Taproot Foundation. So we actually have, as you probably heard referenced multiple times, our online marketplace, Taproot Plus, which is really kind of a one-stop shop, for all things pro bono. You can see my colleague Megan has actually put the sign up page ribbon on the screen where you can go and just hit that button, to take a look at the website. Or you can just go to taprootplus.org. And if you haven't signed up already, you can kind of look at the sign up process. But basically, Taproot Plus is designed to be a flexible and nimble service so that any nonprofit can get skilled volunteers no matter how big they are, or where they're located. And any skilled volunteer or business professional, can support said nonprofit, no matter where they're located. And of course, it's completely free to use for both parties. There are no hidden fees or costs or anything like that for nonprofits or skilled volunteers using Taproot Plus. This is Taproot's way of scaling up the pro bono movement and making sure all those who want to give back, on a pro bono basis can do so. Currently, Taproot Plus is open to business professionals and registered nonprofits and public institutions, and social good organizations in the United States, the UK, the European Union, Canada, and India. And we have over, 85,000 total users. Um, and at this point, basically, I'm just going to go into some of the kind of nuts and bolts of how you can use Taproot Plus, to start partnering with nonprofit organizations. So as you can see here, this is just kind of a basics of the sign up process. Um, And it works similarly to any other like service you've ever signed up to before. We'll ask for some basic information, your email. We'll send you an email confirmation message. Make sure to confirm your email so that you can get updates about all the opportunities you've reached out about. We'll ask you to create a password, etc. You also have the option of using your LinkedIn account to do a more speedy sign up. So we have a partnership with LinkedIn that allows you to just port your information from your LinkedIn account over. So if you want to do that, you can do that as well. We try to make the sign up process easy so you all can get started immediately. And then we'll ask you to designate your kind of skill sets. So the skills that you want to donate. This will help us boost and pitch projects to you. It'll help us curate your marketplace. I'll get to what that looks like, actually, what the actual marketplace looks like in a few slides here. So you're going to tell us these are the skills that I'm interested in donating. We recommend that volunteers have at least 3 years of professional business experience in the skill sets that they flag themselves for. The reason why we provide this guideline is that when nonprofits reach out for pro bono support, whether with Taproot or anywhere else, it's because they're understaffed, under-resourced, and need experienced support that can immediately jump in. So with this in mind, pro bono projects are generally not the best places to practice or break in new skill sets. And or necessarily like learn on the job. Keep in mind that your work will impact the nonprofit's bottom line. And try to only flag yourself for skill sets that you are actually really experienced in. Going back again to that golden rule of pro bono. You can also update these skills through your account. So you're not necessarily just locked into whatever you designate right now today. If you have a new skill set you want to add that you feel very confident in donating, you can do that as well by changing the skills that are listed on your account. So I talked about the marketplace quite a bit. So this is an example of once you get your account up and running, what the marketplace actually looks like. So you'll be able to browse all the projects and one-on-one consulting opportunities that are available on the marketplace by going to the browse opportunities option here. There's a ton of filtering options where you can sort by the project by issue area or specific skill set that you might want to donate. So you can play around with those filtering options. You'll also see that there are several different kinds of engagements, pro bono engagements you can engage on with nonprofits. We do one-on-one projects or one-on-one consults. Our own advisory services department here at Taproot also runs special skilled volunteer-led events that they organize. And we actually want to extend an invitation for you to volunteer at an upcoming Taproot Scopeathon event. This is really a half-day event where volunteers work in teams with nonprofit leaders to explore the root cause of an organization's challenge and using their professional skills and experience to develop a scope of work that addresses the issue. So Taproot provides volunteers in the nonprofit support, templates, and training to be successful during the Scopeathon. We have Scopeathons coming up on March the 23rd and April the 23rd. And what we're going to do is we'll actually include information about how to put your hat in the ring to be a part of one of those Scopeathon events. Those are primarily virtual events. So we host those kind of in a big virtual half-day setting on Zoom. And we'll include information about that in the email follow-up. You will need a Taproot Plus account to sign up. If you can see on the screen here where it says events next to project sessions, that's actually where you would go to look at the upcoming events we're happening. So if maybe you don't have, a few weeks to dedicate to a project, but you can do like one of these half-day events, like a pro bono marathon or a Scopeathon, we also facilitate those through Taproot programming as well. So keep an eye out for that in the follow-up email. And you'll notice I've talked a little bit about the types of pro bono you can do on Taproot Plus. On Taproot Plus, there's really two main types of pro bono service you can engage in. Consultation sessions, which we just call sessions for short, and projects. So, as the names would imply, a consultation session is actually a kind of 1 hour, one off consulting session. These are great for when nonprofits need help diagnosing an issue, brainstorming, or troubleshooting, or even just mapping out a scope of work for a potential project that they're going to come back to Taproot Plus to source assistance for. Projects, as the name would imply, is really kind of like the big feature that Taproot Plus facilitates. So projects are more long-term engagements where you're partnering with a nonprofit organization over a period of weeks. I think you heard Mojgan talk about one of the projects being up to 9 weeks. On average, Taproot Plus projects are 2 to 12 weeks. But that's just kind of an average. The final kind of timeline will be determined, of course, by you and the nonprofit that you're partnered with. But we just wanted to give you kind of a sense of, the average length of these projects. It's highly dependent, obviously, on the deliverable and your own kind of project plan. But these are the two main things you can engage in on Taproot Plus. So when you go to that marketplace, you'll be able to filter and sort by consultation sessions and projects, along with seeing what those kind of special events like scope-a-thons and pro bono marathons coming up are, and if there's any available that you can put yourself forward on. So what'll happen is once you create an account, let's say you're interested in one of these projects that you see up here, you can actually click on the heading of that project. And if you have the right skill set for it, you can apply directly to that project. So what'll happen is we'll help facilitate getting in touch with that nonprofit and setting up the initial phone call between you and the nonprofit so that you can start discussing the project to really see if you're a good fit, and just striking up a rapport with the nonprofit, and seeing if this is something that you might be able to partner with them to do. So Taproot Plus is going to help facilitate that connection. We'll ask you for a statement of interest, basically a short cover letter detailing your skills and experience. We'll send that over to the nonprofit along with your LinkedIn information and your email information. And we'll ask you for a set of times that you might be available in the near future to actually have a call with that nonprofit. And we'll send that slate of times over to the nonprofit as well. If they select one of those times, we will actually confirm and set up the meeting for you. We'll send you a confirmation message. And it works similarly with consultation sessions. So if you apply to a consultation session, Taproot Plus will help you actually schedule that meeting as well. In both cases, we assign you, both parties, a conference line you can use. I always tell people, though, if you want to get in touch in a different way, we are not at all going to be offended if you do not use the assigned conference line. If you feel more comfortable on Zoom or Google Meets or whatever, you can email your partner nonprofit and ask them if they just want to meet on Zoom or one of those services instead. But really, we're focused on getting you in touch with each other and getting you the information that you need to make a good decision about whether or not you want to put yourself forward for one of these opportunities. And finally, this is just an example of what your dashboard would look like. Maybe if you've done a few kind of opportunities, you'll see that your dashboard will kind of start filling up with information, how many projects you've done, how much value you've donated. That big blue toolbar on the left-hand side here is going to kind of be your North Star. So you can keep track of open applications or projects that you applied to, projects that you finished. It's also where you can edit your kind of profile settings if you want to add skills to that to your profile, so that you can start applying to different kinds of projects if you have a new skill set that you feel very confident that you'd be willing to donate. So that's just a taste of kind of at a glance what's available on your user dashboard. We do also have an engagement team that is there to help if you have any troubleshooting questions or need any more assistance using Taproot Plus. So you can always reach out to our engagement team at help@taprootplus.org. Um, as well. They can get you over to me if you'd like to talk to me as well. So we do have an engagement team ready to field any questions. But that pretty much wraps it up in terms of the official content. So now I want to just take a moment to dive into any Q&A questions that you might have. Um, and get those answered on air. Like I said, if for whatever reason we miss your question, we'll try to follow up with you. So I know there's already a few questions that have come in. One of them is if you can filter opportunities by location. Right now, the vast majority of projects are done kind of in a virtual setting. So there's no location filter specifically. But that is something that is going to be a feature that we have in future iterations of Taproot Plus, since we know that in a lot of cases, people are really, really interested in donating their time to nonprofits in their community. There are some nonprofits that post projects that are what we call local only projects, meaning they require someone to actually be in the area to do the project on site. So, for example, like a photography project or something like that it would be a local only opportunity. And what happens with those is they only appear and get boosted out to volunteers kind of in that geographic range. So right now, that is the biggest kind of by location feature that we have on Taproot Plus, but I know that's going to change in the future. Um, Another great question that came in is how long that statement of interest should be. If one paragraph would be enough. Yeah, it would basically be a shorter version of a cover letter, so maybe one or two paragraphs. You don't necessarily have to write a thesis, but really you want to just introduce yourself, what your skills are, and just demonstrate, that you kind of understand what they're asking for, and in particular, passion for the mission. As you heard Mojgan talk about, demonstrating that, this is a cause or issue area that might be near or dear to your heart. If it's something that has affected you personally or affected someone you love personally, if you're an animal lover and you're applying to, an animal rights organization, you could talk about that as well. Nonprofit leaders are very passionate. They work for mission driven organizations. So that goes a long way in instilling confidence in using that statement of interest to talk about your skills and experience. Also be open to, supplying more information, your resume or CV, examples of prior work, if applicable, and even references. If you've worked with other nonprofit leaders before, it's great to, be forward with that information, or say, that you're willing to get them in touch with other people that you've worked with. It doesn't have to be as long as a cover letter, but maybe a paragraph or two describing your skills and experience and kind of passion for the mission are usually what we're looking for with a good statement of interest. And again, if you have your LinkedIn account attached to your account, that's immediately going to be supplied to them as well. So if you like your LinkedIn page, you can definitely go ahead and just put that up there, and they'll be able to see, your skills, your work history, where you've worked, etc., and any information you have on that LinkedIn page. So I think that about concludes it for questions for the Q&A. I want to just thank everyone for being here today. Time is valuable. Thank you so much for considering donating your skills to nonprofits. I hope that we were able to supply you with some good information about how to do that. And again, reach out to us if you have any questions. Take a look at Taproot Plus. And be on the lookout for the follow-up here that's going to have Mojgan's information in it. Also, the information about those two Scope-a-thon events that you might be interested in signing up for, along with a recording of this presentation as well. So if you want to boost this out to anyone in your professional network who might be interested but wasn't able to make it today, please do. And we hope to see you all online. Thank you all for attending. You all have a good one. Bye.